Hello and welcome back to another video. In this video, we're going to be going over some SHSAT math, and we're going to be doing algebra and number theory in these problems. So in this problem, it says, if n is an odd integer that is less than negative 3.25, what's the greatest possible value of n? Okay, so the most important characteristics of n is that it's an odd, it's integer, and it's less than this value. Okay, so how I would visualize this is I would draw a number line, right? So we have, let's say 0, -1, -2, -3, and -4, right? So n is odd, so that instantly cancels out answer choice B because -2 is not odd. It's an integer, all these are integers, but it's less than negative 3.25. So less than means it goes this way, right? Because -2 is greater than -3, and negative 3.25 is about here, right? So if we extend this, by the way, we would have -5 here. So -4 is not odd, but -5 is. So -5 is the greatest value of n in this situation. In this question, it says, if n is an integer and 3n plus 3 is an even number, which expression must also represent an even number? Okay, so n is an integer. 3n plus 3, even, right? And here, in this case, we're adding 3 to 3n, but we know that it's even. So if we subtract 3 from both sides, we'll get 3n, and then an even number minus 3 is always odd. So from this information, 3n is always odd. And now we divide by 3. Well, if n is odd, then 3 times an odd number is always odd. If n is even, then it would make it even. So n must be odd. Okay, now, which expression must also represent an even number? So 5 times an odd plus 1 would give you an odd plus 1, which is even. So that's even. And we could stop here, but we could keep going too. 4n plus 5, so we have an even number times an odd number, n, and that's always even. Plus 5, that's an odd number. Even plus odd is odd, so it's not B. An even number times n, which is odd, gives us even plus odd, same story as B. And odd plus 2 gives us odd, so it's not D. So the answer must be A. And this problem says the product of two positive integers is 65. Which number could be the sum of the two integers? So let's label the two integers as A and B. So we know that A times B is equal to 65. Well, in this case, we would actually do something called prime factorization. That means splitting something up into its prime factors. So 65, let's check if it's divisible by 2. Okay, it doesn't end in a 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, so it's not divisible by 2. How about 3? 65 divided by 3. That would be 2, 6, 5, and 3 doesn't go into 5. So this would not be, 3 is not a factor of 65. Now it ends in a 5, so it must have a factor of 5. 65 divided by 5 would give us 1, 5, 1, 5, 3. Okay, so we know that 5 and 13 are the factors of 65. And on top of that, some of you may recognize 13 as a prime number. So the characteristic of prime factorization is that the two numbers, the numbers in it must be prime, and 5 and 13 satisfy that criteria. So from this, we can check the factor pairs that get you 65. Well, it's 5 and 13, and also always don't forget about 1 is 65. So, and it asks for what could be the sum. So the sum of these, plus and plus, would be 18, and the sum of these would be 66. So in this case, only 18 appears among the answer choices. If 66 appeared, then it is also an answer. In this question, it says Joseph is 5 feet 9 inches tall, and Roberto is 6 feet 4.5 inches tall. What's the difference in height between them? Okay, so how I would imagine this is 5 and 9, and then as like on a number line, let's say, then over here would be 6 foot 0, and here would be 6 foot 4.5, right? So how do I get from 5'9" to 6 foot? Well, some of you may know that there's 12 inches in a foot. So in order to get from 5'9" to 6 foot, we need to add 3 inches. And in order to get from 6 foot to 6 foot 4.5, you'd have to add 4.5 inches. And from this is simple. You just add 3 and 4.5 to get 7.5 inches. It took Lars 2 hours to ride his bicycle for 48 kilometers. What was his average speed in miles per hour? So here it asks, and it bolds even, miles per hour. You'll notice that the units given is actually kilometers. So 48 kilometers, and we know that 1.6 kilometers, km, is equal to 1 mile. So we basically have to convert kilometers to miles in this case, because that's the unit it measures it in. So how do I get this ratio to this ratio? Well, some of you may notice that if I multiply this by 30, we would get 48 kilometers on this side. And that would give us 30 miles. So this is equal to 30 miles. 2 hours is equal to 30 miles. And if I want to find out miles per hour, I would divide both sides by 2 hours. So, yeah, so it would be 15 miles per hour. And that would be answer choice B. In this case, in this question, sorry, integer x is evenly divisible by 3. Which expression below is also evenly divisible by 3? Okay, so x is an integer evenly divisible by 3. So in this case, actually, for these kinds of problems where it just gives you some general information about this number x, you can actually say that x, let's say, is 3. And now, all we have to do is plug it in. So this would give us 7 with x is equal to 3. This would give us 9 minus 5, that's 4. This would give us 4 times 3 minus 1, that's 11. And here it would give us 12 plus 6, 18. And now it just asks which one's divisible by 3. Well, it has to be h. And this strategy works for these kinds of problems because this is a general problem. It gives very vague information, and it just gives us 4 answer choices, and you know that 3 of them must be incorrect. If you end up getting more than 1, then you either plugged it in wrong or your logic was wrong. In this question, it says, what percentage is closest in value to 0.0099? Okay, so here, obviously, this isn't a percentage, this is a number. So how do we get from a number to a percentage? Well, let's say we have 0.01. This would be 1%. 1%. So what we're actually doing here is we're multiplying by 100, because this percentage sign means 1 over 100. So we multiply this by 100. And to do that, we would move this decimal place 1, 2. So 0.99, and we add the percentage symbol. And so what's the closest to this then? Well, 0.99 is closest to 1, so it must be G. F is incorrect, E is incorrect. This G is just the closest one, because 1 is the closest to 0.99. This question, it says, the greatest common factor of 24 and x is 8. How many possible values for x are greater than 10 and less than 70? Well, the first thing I'd do is I would do an inequality. So x is greater than 10, so x is greater than 10, but is also less than 70. Okay, so and you also know that the greatest common factor of 24 and x is 8. So 24 is equal to 3 times 8. And you know that since x and 24 share and 8, that means that x is going to be a multiple of 8, right? So what are the multiples of 8 between 10 and 70? That would be 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, not 72 because that's already above the limit, right? Okay, so now we're going to go through each one and check if the greatest common factor is 8. Well, what's the greatest common factor of 24 and 16? That would be 8, so 16 works. But now, what's the greatest common factor of 24 and 24? Well, this is actually a property. The greatest common factor of two of the same number is just that number, because a number always has itself as a factor. So actually 24 doesn't satisfy this property. Now we're going to check 32. 24 over 8 is 3, 32 over 8 is 4, and 3 and 4 are relatively prime, so this works. 40 over 8, that's 5, 3, so this also works. 48 and 24, if you notice, 48 is actually double 24. So the greatest common divisor of 48 and 24 is actually 24, so this doesn't work. How about 56? Well, 56 divided by 8, that's 7. Then 24 divided by 8 is 3, they're relatively prime, so this is satisfying. And then 64, that would give us 64 over 8, that would be 8. Then 24 over 8, that would be 3, they're relatively prime, so this is also 1. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 numbers that work, which gives us answer choice H.